We're right in the middle of where things are happening, so we got a few guests lined up for the next round. And this is fully DIY independent web radio based here at EUI, so it's a pleasure also to be here. Thank you very much to both of you.
And lots of improvisation today, but that's the spirit.
Exactly.
So I would like to start with you, Sarah, because you just left your breakout room, and what were the main takeaways? So what were the things that impressed you the most about this conversation?
Well, I would say it was entirely in the spirit of improvisation, in the sense that we didn't know what was going to happen. The theme was the power of embodied knowledge. And the premise was that if you experience something, that's a totally different way of knowing something than if you just read about it. So what we had was a scene that we have edited out of court proceedings, where there is a juxtaposition between what the local population thinks and what the government of the country thinks about the involvement of the International Criminal Court. And it's almost a dialogue of the deaf. Now, anyway, the audience reenacted that. They came onto the stage. And then we had a reflection session. And the only thing that was predictable was that the views and perspectives would be really diverse. And some people said, this was so strange. And why this? And is this not the best way? And other people said, this reminded me of when I worked in the field in the conflict zone 20 years ago. And you're perfectly striking the real issues. So it triggers something in people to teach this way.
Francisco, what is the session that you attended today?
So I've had numerous conversations about academic freedom, and I think the takeaway from all the sessions and the conversations I had after the session was that there seems to be a tension between some academics. So what is the real purpose of our scholarship? And I think it's a fair discussion to have, and it was interesting. Some people would say there is value to the intellectual discussion in itself. We shouldn't be too focused on impacts, too focused on, people were saying, a product-oriented approach to this. But then other people said we have leaned too far towards the sort of intellectual discussion. Right. All the papers we write, all the books we write should be done with a very specific purpose, with a very specific goal. And I think that resonated a lot with Jojo Larry as well, as she was saying, there seems to be a growing division between academia and the world outside, and we perhaps ought to bridge that a bit more.
Yeah. This bridge part is actually very much important, and it's at the core heart of events such as this one we're having, and the previous speakers in this broadcast were indeed also hammering on that, at the importance of events such as this one. So I actually wanted to ask both of you, you mentioned engagement with the audience and the way that the people reacted to your reenactment. You also mentioned academic freedom, which is also something that is very much important, especially having very clear in mind the target that you're talking to. But events such as this one are obviously a bit more general, so we try to attract policymakers, we're trying to attract the general public, we're attracting obviously other scholars. So what's your take on getting out there? How should we go out there and make sure that academia is not an ivory tower, it's not something where people, like-minded people, are exchanging ideas or maybe argue on some concepts, but it actually doesn't really get out there. So perhaps starting from you in your experience of also following up what you may have heard and the reactions that you may have in today's panel.
Yeah, so for me, the out there doesn't exist. The out there is very much in here. Everything I do is based on experiences, conversations, observations in the real world, with the real world. And I think we are very much part of the real world, because we shape how people think, and how people think is the way they see the world and how they address the world. Right. So I would say, in my world, there is no such differentiation.
I love this because Sarah has done so much practical work in the sense that she knows what she's talking about, not just writing about what she's experienced. And I have the same feelings. That there is this idea that we are writing about the world as if we were observing the world, which is a fiction to some extent. And I often wonder what this fiction is serving exactly who. Definitely not serving the people that are impacted by the scholarship, not serving us as well, because the model of scholarship we have today is not very sustainable. So to bridge the gap, I would say very practically, perhaps change the format, do things like this, work with different formats. I work a lot with audio, for example, for my students, which they seem to love more than my papers or my books. So think about the method, think about the message, and then just involve people. Open the doors of universities to other sides of society.
May I react to that?
Yes,
Sure.
please.
Because
I also feel that? No.
what I really like so much about what you say is, look, the current model is not sustainable, right? And especially if we have a model that is based on everything is written assessments. But that's exactly why we are proposing to teach through reenactments. Because the experience of reenacting is something that AI cannot do for you. And also reflecting upon your own experience, you can tell AI, tell me what I thought. It's not going to be real, right? So that's we're going along with changing times, not because of AI, but because we inherently believe that it's a good thing. But as it happens, it's so human that it can beat even AI.
But you see, it's a new type of professor you need, or maybe the professor that we always needed before, which is not just writing and then reciting, but thinking about how to actually teach. The teaching component of academia will regain its original importance outside.
I have a question in between for the both of you, because now we are in a period where we all want to catch up with AI, Europe versus the US versus whatever. This for sure will have an impact in many dimensions of our lives. How do you see it impacting education, more specifically?
I defer to the expert.
No, so I have obviously many hours of conversation about this. I think the first impact is a bad one, which is the way that we don't use these tools. We're very much dependent on existing, most of them American tools, and we're just using them critically. The long-term potential, I think, is enormous. But this will only fulfill that potential if we collectively, academics, the rest of society, understand the best way to use. And for me, we should let AI do the kind of things that should already be done by machines that represent very little value in our scholarship, but the critical part, the reenactment part, the critical analysis. These systems will always replicate, because of their technological architecture, they will always replicate existing past consensus. And that's the most dangerous thing you can think of if you're trying to do scholarship that thinks about future values, I always give the students the example. If we would, ChatGPT 1915 in the US, and we would ask it, what is the perfect bus architecture? Where should people of color sit? He would naturally say they shouldn't sit, or they should sit at the back. And there would be no critical assessment of that. So our role is to maybe the things that are a bit more. Literature review is a good example, right? But what's out there already, maybe the machines do better. They read faster, they condense better than we do. But the critical parts, the human part, the teaching part, that should be left in place.
But Francisco, maybe I'm using the wrong AI and you can teach me. But what I was struck by is that even in reading old stuff, I didn't find AI particularly good. And to give you an example, everybody always says that Lauterpacht, a big figure in my field, said something. But I couldn't pin down where exactly he would have said that. So I asked AI, in which book did he say this? And then the AI gives me some pages or some quotes in some books, and I read those pages, and he doesn't use those terms. What AI does is AI reads the interpretation of others, and that's how Lauterpacht said it. So I would say that even history and historical research, going back to the original sources, is in an age of AI all the more important.
I totally agree, and I think that's part of the problem, because it will be what the LLMs will do is try to find a sort of mini consensus. And of course, you read everything. Some academics probably misinterpreted some point Lauterpacht, and then everyone started misinterpreting. The only thing I will say in defense of AI is that humans also do that quite often, right? Absolutely. The majority of academics will read things that someone said about. So maybe your take is. It's not just towards AI, it's also towards...
I also check their footnotes.
Yeah, exactly. Check footnotes and read the original sources.
Before letting you go, Sarah, the EU has always said in its foreign policy that there will be no peace without justice. Is that changing right now?
So that's exactly how our session started today. That the Council of Europe, so not the EU, a different body, but recently convened a meeting for legal advisors, because some members wanted to host peace talks between Russia and Ukraine. but they were also under a legal obligation, pursuant to the Rome Statute of the International Criminal Court, to arrest President Putin the moment he would set foot on their territory. And they refer to this as a tension of peace versus justice. Now, this is exactly the slogan that the EU has been fighting against for a long time when it was about conflicts elsewhere in the world. So I think that this experience in Europe, or in Europe, in the region, is really perhaps also changing how Europe is looking at other conflicts.
Thank you very much to both.
It was a fantastic conversation, but in the time it's a bit depressing. So we will be finishing up this streaming in just a few minutes. So thank you very much for your time. It was a pleasure having you here both.
Pleasure. Thank you.
See you around for the rest of the event, and thank you very much. I wish you a great day.